G'day. This week I've done a bit more on the Taylor Hobson rotary table thingy, and this is a pretty sort of major step at the moment because what I've done is I've put in the locking device for the swivelly bit onto the base, and I've then surfaced off the top of the table, top of the swivelly bit, and put the bore in for the table. Now I've still got a few other things to do. I've got some threads to put on there, I've got some locking pins, I've got graduations to do and all that sort of thing. But it's actually looking like it should, like the picture. So I'm really pleased about that. Come along for the ride. I'm now up to drilling the hole for the hold down bolt. Now that looks like 45 degrees, but if I come along here, I can check that. This is a Reglis Swiss angle indicator. Really nice bit of kit. Brought to my attention by Bob, my friend over there in Perth. But that is showing that yes, that is 45 degrees. So I've got my casting all set up on my gaff blocks. This is the 45 degree angle here. I've got a couple of bits of 1/2 inch tool steel just to lift this up a little bit, and I've clamped down. The clamp that I've used on the far side is one of these. I made this up for, I think it was actually to make these. But if you're trying to clamp onto a concave surface, that's a much better idea than trying to use a flat clamp like that. So I've just got one of those over here. To see that I've got my hole in the right spot, I've got a ball bearing. And as you can see from that, as it slowly slows down, that's around about where my hole is going to be, and that ties up nicely with the original. So I can go along and I'll actually use a dial indicator to drag that across there and find out where the minimum is, and that'll set me in that direction. And then I'll put the midpoint of these two sides, and that'll set me there so I can go straight through and drill a hole. It has to be a reasonably tight fitting one, so I'll probably drill it out to 12 or something like that, 12.5, and then run a ream through just to get it down to the final 1/2 inch size, because the bolt that goes in there is a tight fit. If it's too loose, the whole thing will rattle around and shake around. I've taken the base off the gaff blocks, and I'm now doing before I did that, I just sort of machined this down to about the right size so that the nut would fit. Using the existing as an example, this first hole here is for a small diameter rod, and that'll push down on there and just retain that so that it's adjusted so that will be snug but not bind things up. The second hole here, which I'm yet to drill and tap, pushes down here, and so when you want to lock this up, you graunch down on that screw, and that pushes down there and so pulls that up tight. So I'm just doing these two holes at the moment. I've taken a little bit off the top there. I need to smooth that up with a bit of a file. I did try the other part in here now that I've got everything there, but this gets in the way. So what I want to do is get this done so I can then set the part on there and machine off the top surface there, so that means that surface is then parallel to the base, but we need to get this sorted first. I've had to relieve the back of the casting here because it was just starting to bind on here, and although it was basically flat, I wanted to give myself a few degrees of over rotation before it started camming out, just to make sure that I had enough clearance there. So I've done that. Now I'm working out where the notches are in this bolt. And so what I've done is I've marked where the bolt comes to here, and then using a bit of whiteboard pen, put a mark there, or, colour the top in, put that down the hole, and then with a bit of rod just sort of rubbed it in the right spot. And so what that's given me is a mark there, and if I take that mark as being around about the middle of where I need to go, all I need to do is clamp this on a 45 degree angle. I can come with a milling cutter, and because I know the offset between this and this hole and this hole, I can also come along and just sort of step up and put another notch in there. So that should do me there. All I need to do there is just pop this into the vise. After a bit of mucking around, here I am. I've got the keeper piece in there so that can rotate without necessarily pulling out, and then I've got my locking screw there which will lock that bolt in. Now I've outsmarted myself today, not hard, you know, sometimes. I haven't got a socket head grub screw of the right size for this. I'm going to have to get one of those at some stage. So at the moment I've got this bolt sitting proud. Now what I'd like to do is get this thing basically leveled up. This way I'm not so concerned about because I can tilt that. It's this way that I want to make sure is level, and it seems to be. What I'd like to do now is basically set this up and run a fly cutter across this. Just a very light cut, but to try and make sure that this is smooth, this is all flat, and if there is any you know, sag from here to here, that it's machined off. And that way it means when I have the table on there, it's square to, you know, the axis here. But we'll see how we go with that one. I may have to, you know, do most of this and then just sort of come back and just clean this up with a file or something like that. We'll see. I've been busy with my adjustable level. I've got that way. Basically within, I think that one division's 45 minutes. I think I've got it sort of pretty much spot on, but maybe half a division, so 20 minutes. This side here is not quite parallel to the table, which is what I was wanting, but a 0.4 of a millimetre feeler, so 16 thou under the edge of the level brings it back up to level. So I'll put the fly cutter in and just try and do a very, very slight pass. I've got a jack under here, and that's more just to stop it deflecting away from the cutter. I've tried very hard not to sort of you know, jack it up enough to do that. This is locked up hard, so as I said, I might have to come in here and just, you know, clean that last bit up with a file or something like that. But that's the plan. Once I've got that done, I can then, possibly even today, depending on how kind the daylight is to me, possibly bore that out so that I've got this square and that to size, and that way the table is able to go in and I can then finish off doing bits on the table. So this afternoon I've managed to fly cut the top surface here, and that's come out rather well as bore this to size. And to do that I had a couple of tools that I've sort of made, pinched from other people. This one is something that Tormac do apparently. It's a fly cutter, but I've used a lathe tool in there with it's actually a cast iron tip, a tip for cast iron, but for a fly cutter, that works remarkably well. Rather than having a bit of high-speed steel getting blunt on the cast iron, you know, doing it this way certainly gives a nice finish, as you can see. The other thing that I did was, this is a lathe boring bar, and I cut this off to use in my boring head. It was being scrapped for other reasons, so it's not an enormous loss. But one thing I did have to do was machine the back of it, because it's hard to see here because that's got a flat on it. But if I'd just taken this down so this was round to fit into the boring head here, this would have been above the centre line, and so it would have caused all sorts of grief trying to get in there. I might have had rubbing, I might have had to try and relieve it or kick it round. In a lathe you can lift the height up, which effectively does the same thing, but here I had to adapt that. So that was just a quick I wonder if I can get this done in time. I'm going to clean that up a little bit and make it a little nicer, but it seems to have worked, so that's good. So there is the table, and there is the rotary base. Goes in there really nicely. So I've got to put some, now that I've got this sorted out, I can put a thread on this to lock it down. I can put markings around the edge here for my angles. I can put some angles on here too and all that sort of thing, but this is the major machining done. Now it's a matter of cleaning up and doing some little bits and pieces. You know, there's the stops for the angles and all that sort of stuff. But I feel that, you know, on the homeward stretch here. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you for the next one.